Visual concrete involves everybody in getting to the same result. If you want to go from here, this top slide, which is a very, very good render of what the architect wanted, to what was actually produced at Jürgen Teller's, there's a lot of effort for everybody. And everybody means everybody. So the teamwork is starts with the client, it goes through all of the design team, and it involves the people who are actually making the stuff on site. And you've got to engage everybody if you're going to end up finding that, that you've got something good. And for the structural engineer, of course, it's a delight when people say that they want visual concrete, because you know that in many ways the structural engineer's life is then easy, because the structural engineer always wants good concrete. They want it reasonably strong. We want it to last for 50 years. If you want it to look good, it's going to be reasonably strong and it's going to last for 50 years. So writing the specification becomes very, very easy. Managing expectations, exactly. And there's lots of advice, and it's been around for years and years and years, the same things. And some stuff you just can't change. These quotes here are from BS 8110, which was written back in the kind of days when dinosaurs had just cleared the earth, I think. But you've got to be very careful about what you do with kind of concrete. Yes, what you're going to do when you look at it, but if you leave it outside, certainly, how is it going to weather? In particular, if you're doing external concrete. So just be aware of that when thinking about any kind of specification. And then I'm going to kind of, in a way, talk a little bit about precast first, and then go on and talk about in situ concrete. And this focuses on a number of projects that I've been delighted to be involved in over the years, starting with this, which big project for St John's College in Oxford with a lot of precast, and where, yes, the engineer didn't actually write big chunks of the specification, and certainly went on and worked on a number of other projects with McCormack, Jameson, Pritchard, who were the architects for this, and they knew what they wanted from the concrete as a material. So they had a completely prescribed mix where they decided exactly which limestone aggregates and sands and everything they kind of wanted. And the engineer just said, yeah, well, that's the concrete. And yes, it's kind of strong enough, and we then kind of make it work as either as in situ or as kind of big pieces of precast. And yes, you always do have to be able to handle and maneuver big precast pieces. And transportation and erection is very important for precast concrete. So this project, I'm just kind of reminded of this because the latest president of the Institution of Structural Engineers was talking about this project at their address, and I thought, oh yes, interesting, because I'd never realised that somebody thought this might not have been a concrete kind of roof in the first place, because we only picked this up to be working on producing the mould drawings for this project, which is the American Air Force Museum at Duxford. And their credit to those who'd kind of gone before us, because they had thought about the fact that this was going to be precast. So the shape of this roof is a torus, which is like a car inner tube. So it's a circle around a circle. So all of your precast elements can just be made from a kind of simple circular shape. There is a kind of tiny bit of curvature in the other direction. Across these T's, we'd have needed about 2 or 3 millimeters across that 2 meter wide unit to get the perfect huge radius curve in the other direction. So of course it's just flat and singly curved. And these units were a huge success because the engineer at the precaster worked out a simple jig for allowing him to stack 2 of those on a lorry to take them to site. And we think that's one of the reasons they won the job, because they instantly halved their kind of transport cost for their precast because they worked out how to put two of these big things on one lorry at the same time. But more often, precast is at a kind of smaller and more intimate sort of scale, where you may have to be careful about, yes, this whole viewing distance kind of question for concrete, because some things will perhaps get slightly kind of closer scrutiny. So yes, not quite up here, but maybe a little bit more like this, than at least 2 or 3 kind of meters away. And then perhaps you need to be very careful about selection of the material and involve all sorts of people in the kind of process. We had a concrete expert advising us on material selection for this precast staircase to go into an art gallery project in London. This was, I think, the first time I'd worked with the architects who went on to do Jürgen Teller's studio on something that was visual kind of exposed concrete. And yes, you can absolutely. And this is a stair meant to behave like a stone stair. So then putting the precast up, you've got temporary centering support on the left of that picture as it kind of goes up. And then just to remind everybody, as Elaine was saying, that concrete is actually the small part of getting the visual appearance. It's the molds, and it's not just the form face of the mold. It's the whole mold construction. It's building the mold. It's got to be robust. Any of the joints in the form face panels have really got to be kind of well sealed. And you've got to think about how you prepare the mold. And often, if you're doing in situ concrete and you're going to use the same shutters several times, can you accept the fact that the appearance out of the mold will change as you use the mold more than once? And it's very rare that the best comes out of the first mold use. Second, third, fourth, depending on the material and how many uses you'll get out of it, but second, third, fourth will tend to get better and often a bit more consistent. The first, a brand new thing isn't great. So just be aware that a brand new thing isn't great. So sometimes as a precaster, depending on how much repetition you've got, you might be able to abandon the first one if it's not really very good out of the mold, if you're kind of confident that it is going to kind of get better. And so that's the other thing with precast, which is that if you are using a mold and you are wanting to get kind of maximum uses out of it, one of the things to remember is that preparing for the precast may involve you thinking much further ahead about what's going to happen, because the precaster will want to make one mold, and then if he's got to make shorter pieces, he'll often want to move the stop end down the mold. Can't do it the other way, because otherwise where he's put the stop end will show in a longer piece, which means that if you need the shortest piece on site first, you've got to give the precaster a much longer lead in so that he can be able, because that's the last one he may make, but if it's the first one you need on site, it needs thinking about. But yes, you can get a wonderful result. And with concrete, of course, you still have the advantage that it's very adaptable if you kind of need to make changes. We had to post-drill and fix some baluster posts onto that staircase because the architect was after everything very slim and slender, and it was some fancy kind of bronze material. And we did all sorts of sums and said, yeah, well, this balustrade is strong enough, but we are worried that you might think it's a little bit too whippy when you kind of push it. And then it went up and they said, yes, it's a bit too whippy. We want some extra little kind of bars on, which we were able to kind of fit into the precast. Now, this is a job that I went to look at before I really started working on anything precast. So yes, go to visits. This was a piece of concrete that Price & Myers had done at the Royal Court Theatre. I went to look at this as one of the examples of a visual concrete with a kind of contractor, and because it was in the cafe, got a free lunch out of it. So yes, visits are very important for all sorts of reasons. And Some surfaces will stand slightly kind of closer inspection. So again, it's thinking about how close are you going to look at something. This is a school theatre project with board marked concrete. And yes, it's interesting. I think some of the board marked concrete that people go to look at, I don't know, National Theatre, certainly the Boots factory in Nottingham, I don't think anybody thought that that was ever going to be kind of beautiful and looked at when they built that factory in the 30s. And now you go around looking at it and thinking, gosh, this is kind of wonderful. Well, it wasn't. It was just utilitarian to build a factory. It just happens to then become fashionable, maybe. But we had 3 trial panels to be satisfied with this board mark finish for a school project, and we'd written a fairly thick specification to start with in terms of how we wanted the boards set out and how this was to be made to work. But reasonably successful because we went back to the same client for another project and went for a lot of kind of smooth, flat concrete. Elaine was talking about pigments. This was lightened by using limestone powder to try and lighten this kind of concrete because it's technology that does work with ready mix because they can put it in. And sometimes you do need to understand that supply thing because the GGBS and the PFA, can you have either? Well, you can't necessarily have the one that you want. You've got to find out whether your local supplier has got the one that you want or whether but you can always put this crushed limestone powder in because, in fact, colour from the concrete is absolutely dependent on the smallest particles generally. So it is the cement and any kind of filler material like that. The smallest bits give the colour. Sort of maybe you can get a hint of the sand. And unless you're going to do something to the surface, you never see the aggregate, this coarse aggregate. So it really doesn't matter unless you're going to acid etch, grit blast, or tool the concrete and deliberately kind of expose it. But yes, you do need to be careful. You set out all the formwork joints very carefully in the slab. Usually, that's down to the architect, sometimes in discussion with the kind of contractor, and then try and make sure that all the details where the formwork is going to get tricky are nicely hidden. In other words, use the traditional craft kind of building skills. Why did the Victorians have kind of cornices in rooms? Because it kind of hides a whole load of stuff. Why do nice little recess details work? Because they allow you to hide the kind of slightly fudgy stuff that is inevitably there in putting something together on site. Now, if anybody'd seen the video loop that was running about self-compacting concrete, this is self-compacting concrete. How well can it follow a pattern? Well, I think lots of people have seen this leaf from the Lincoln Museum, which was a Panther Hudspeth project. I think it was the first time that Price and Myers had used self-compacting kind of concrete because of the demanding spaces that were wanted. Now, actually, the story behind the beautiful leaf was that this was as a result of somebody having not cleaned the shutters out properly. And then the architect decided they kind of quite liked it, so they put a leaf in deliberately. But yes, sometimes we learn from our mistakes as much as from anything else. But yes, fantastic. Lincoln Museum is a fantastic project. Some really kind of great concrete and some fantastic big kind of wonderful spaces as well. So yes, you can then get concrete to work for all kinds of different spaces that you want. So now this is moving towards kind of some more recent projects with the architects who did Jürgen Teller's studio. This is a project of theirs. It's three flats. where the client was kind of quite interested in exposing the concrete. And this is all pretty standard ready-mix concrete, not self-compacting. There were some issues with the fact that the engineer had perhaps got a bit too much reinforcement in some of the columns to kind of work without having self-compacting kind of concrete, in here. But fantastic kind of contrast between the kind of concrete which is exposed and the finishes in there. Delighted kind of client who was kind of quite keen to see that, and a happy architect. And then you can go on the same project. You can kind of go from how close can you kind of match things that are really very different. This is a beautiful kind of precast stair made off-site and put together in a similar way as to the one I kind of showed you earlier, and in many ways with a sort of similar balustrade, only the balustrade works because it gets lots of nice curves around the kind of stair, so you kind of don't get the whip and the wobble on it from it being a straight line. But on the same project, we also had quite a light coloured in situ concrete, which did all sorts of things, including keeping the structural engineer happy, because this beam here, which was part of the architect's design, was also very useful in being able to prop the top of a 2-story basement so that we can actually build the building in the first place. And then the ugly kind of steel prop was cased in kind of concrete, left in place, made to look beautiful. So NSCs helps you to kind of decide what to kind of pick for concrete if you don't want something special. So if you don't want special, do go and look. If you can't find other examples, do go and look at the construct reference panels around the country, get an idea of what you kind of get by default from those. We've talked about what makes the concrete lighter and darker. It's teamwork. It's everybody. It's from the client through to the people who are going to build it that kind of allow you to get a good project. You can't do without the kind of quality of the formwork. It can get more complex on site than it does in the precasters yard. These are the roof lights at Jürgen Teller's studio in Latimer Road. But what you're looking to do is to kind of turn the formwork into the kind of concrete, and you have to have the right formwork to get the concrete that you want. You need to do trial panels. Maybe you can kind of stack 7 of them up on top of each other so that you get some different outcomes from the kind of different panels. Try several things together and allow you to see just what variations happen in the same place as well in pretty similar light. And if you want really carefully thought out details, you have to kind of work very hard at providing the information as you're part of the teamwork to give it to the guy on site so that you can get an outcome that is what you wanted and which hopefully meets everybody's expectations. Yeah, reinforcement is the engineer's job. So the main input that the structural engineer has is trying to make sure that there's not too much reinforcement to mess up the visual kind of concrete. You've got to make sure that you can get the concrete around the reinforcement and it doesn't get in the way. Particularly if you've promised the architect that they can definitely have 100 wide rib fins across to get the light they want in the space below. Even if you can't make them work to Eurocode 2 for fire, you just kind of go, well, it's a private client, we'll make them work to BS 8110 and hopefully it won't burn down. And then visual concrete, it can turn out absolutely fantastic if everybody works together. Latimer Road used self-compacting, but to an extent the whole final specification was agreed with the contractor once we were on site. It wasn't a fait accompli before we kind of went to tender, and you can get all sorts of things. So there's board marked on the outside, there's smooth inside on that project, and there is stuff outside. And the interesting thing, of course, will be to go back and to see how well we've managed with the weathering of that at the end on the outside. That photo, I think, is over there. Yes, so you can go from there to there, but it's hard work and it has to involve everybody pulling their weight as part of a combined team. Okay, thanks very much.